The woman sleeping on his grave was not the first trespasser Zephyrion Valteris had encountered in his 3 centuries of existence, but she was certainly the most audacious. He stood at the edge of the cemetery, the moon casting long shadows across the weathered stones, and studied the small figure curled atop the elaborate marble monument that bore his name and a death date from 1724. The stone was cold, the epitaph worn smooth by wind and rain, and yet this girl had chosen it as her resting place. Her threadbare jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, her dark hair spilling across the carved angel's wings that decorated the grave's headstone. Zephyrion approached silently, his footsteps making no sound on the damp grass. The cemetery was one of the oldest in the city, tucked away in a forgotten corner where skyscrapers loomed in the distance but did not yet encroach. His court maintained the property, kept the graves pristine, and used the elaborate mausoleum at the center as a hidden entrance to the passages below. This particular grave, his grave, was a decoy, a marker for a body that had never been buried, a symbol of the death he had never truly experienced. He could have woken her immediately, but something made him pause. She looked young, perhaps early 20s, with a face that would have been lovely if not for the exhaustion etched into every line, the shadows beneath her eyes, the way her body curled defensively, even in sleep. Her clothes were clean but worn thin, her shoes splitting at the seams, and beside her sat a backpack that looked like it contained everything she owned. Nowhere else to go, he thought, and felt something unexpected stir in his chest. Pity, perhaps, or recognition. He had been cast out once, long ago, before he became what he was now. He remembered the cold. He knelt beside the grave, close enough that his presence would register in her sleeping mind, close enough that his shadow fell across her face. Then he waited. She woke slowly, awareness creeping in by degrees. First her breathing changed, quickening, and then her eyes fluttered open. They were gray, he noticed, the color of storm clouds, and they widened as they focused on him. She scrambled backward so fast she nearly fell off the grave, catching herself with one hand on the marble angel. Her other hand went to her backpack, clutching it like a shield. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, words tumbling over each other. "I didn't think anyone would mind. I wasn't hurting anything. I'll leave right now. I just needed somewhere to sleep and the gates were open and I thought—" "You thought a cemetery would be safe," Zephyrion finished, his voice carrying a trace of amusement. Ironic. She stared at him, taking in his appearance for the first time now that panic had subsided slightly. He knew what she saw. A man who looked perhaps 30, with hair so pale it was nearly white, skin that had not seen sun in centuries, and eyes that were too dark, too knowing, too old for his face. He wore modern clothes, well-tailored black that would not look out of place in the city's nightlife, but there was something about the way he held himself that suggested older centuries, older manners. "I really am sorry," she said again, more quietly this time. "I'll go. Do you know whose grave you've been sleeping on?" She glanced down at the headstone, squinting in the moonlight to read the inscription. "Zephyrion Valteris, 1689 to 1724. That's you?" "The name, at least. But you're not dead." "No," he agreed. "I'm very much not dead." She processed this with remarkable composure, considering. Her eyes moved from his face to the grave and back again, and he watched her mind work, watched her arrive at conclusions that should have been impossible but that she accepted anyway, because what choice did she have? The evidence stood before her. "Vampire," she said, not a question. "Vampire King, if we're being precise about titles." She laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more exhaustion than humor. "Of course. I fell asleep on a Vampire King's grave. That's exactly the kind of luck I have." Despite himself, Zephyrion smiled. "What's your name?" She hesitated, clearly weighing whether giving her name to a vampire was wise, then seemed to decide she had nothing left to lose. Kira Kensington." "Well, Kira Kensington, you've created quite a situation." He stood, offering her his hand. "Come with me." She did not take his hand. "Why?" "Because you have nowhere else to go, and I find myself curious about what would drive someone to sleep on a grave in November rather than seek proper shelter." "There is no proper shelter," she said, and her voice was flat, factual. "The shelters are full." The waiting lists are months long. I've been trying, but she trailed off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out. I always do. Or, Zephyrion said, you could come with me, spend the night somewhere warm, and we can discuss this in the morning like reasonable beings. You're a vampire. And you're sleeping on graves. Neither of us are having a conventional evening. She studied him for a long moment, those gray eyes searching his face for something, some sign of danger or deception. He let her look, kept his expression open, curious, unthreatening despite what he was. Finally, she took his hand. Her skin was cold, he noticed as he pulled her to her feet. Human cold, the cold of exposure and insufficient food, not the supernatural chill of his own flesh. She swayed slightly as she stood, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. When did you last eat? He asked. Yesterday. Maybe the day before. She picked up her backpack, slinging it over one shoulder. Time gets weird when you're this tired. Zephyrion made a decision then, one that would change everything, though he did not know it yet. Come. My home is not far. He led her through the cemetery, past rows of graves and monuments, toward the central mausoleum. She followed without question, too tired or too desperate to care where he was taking her. At the mausoleum's entrance, he pressed his palm against a stone that looked like all the others, and a door swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Of course it's underground, Kira muttered, but she followed him down. The passages beneath the cemetery were old, carved from bedrock and reinforced over centuries, lit now with electric lights that cast everything in warm gold. Zephyrion led her through corridors that twisted and turned, past doors that led to chambers she could not see, until they reached a larger space, a vestibule with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with tapestries that predated the country above them. Wait here, he said, and disappeared through one of the doors. Kira stood in the center of the vestibule, clutching her backpack, looking around with an expression that was part wonder, part disbelief. The tapestries depicted scenes she did not recognize, battles and courts and ceremonies from ages past. Everything spoke of wealth, of power carefully maintained, of a world that existed beneath the mundane surface of the city above. Zephyrion returned with another man, this one dark-haired but equally pale, equally regal. The man's eyes went immediately to Kira, widened, and then he turned to Zephyrion with an expression of profound shock. Is this... Her name is Kira? Zephyrion interrupted smoothly. She needs food and a room for the night. Can you arrange that, Matthias? Matthias stared at Kira for another long moment, then bowed, the gesture sharp and formal. Of course, my king. I'll have the kitchens prepare something immediately. He left, but not before throwing one more stunned glance over his shoulder at Kira, who looked thoroughly confused. Why did he look at me like that? She asked. Because you were sleeping on my grave, Zephyrion said, and in our world that has certain implications. What kind of implications? The superstitious kind. Nothing you need to worry about tonight. He gestured for her to follow him again, leading her to a set of rooms that were clearly guest quarters, furnished with more luxury than Kira had seen in her entire life. There was a bed with a thick mattress and soft linens, a bathroom with heated floors, a sitting area with chairs that looked like they belonged in a museum. This is too much, Kira said, backing toward the door. I don't need all this, just a couch would be. Sit, Zephyrion said, gently pushing her toward one of the chairs. Food will be here soon, and then you can sleep in an actual bed for the first time in... How long? 2 months, she admitted, sinking into the chair. The cushions seemed to embrace her, and she let out a small, involuntary sound of relief. Maybe 3. I lost my apartment when I lost my job, and I've been trying to get back on my feet, but everything costs so much, and no one will hire you when you don't have an address, and She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Sorry, you don't need to hear all this. I asked, Zephyrion pointed out. He took the chair across from her, settling into it with the unconscious grace of someone who had been sitting in chairs for 300 years. What did you do before you lost your job? I was a librarian, a children's librarian specifically. I loved it. Her voice went soft with longing. But the library lost funding, and they had to make cuts, and I was the newest hire, so... She shrugged, the gesture trying for nonchalance and failing. Budget cuts. They said they were sorry, gave me 2 weeks severance, and that was that. And your family? Dead. Car accident when I was 17. I've been on my own since then. She said it matter-of-factly, as if she had told the story so many times it had lost its power to hurt. I did okay for a while, worked my way through community college, got the job at the library. I thought I was building something. Turns out it was all pretty fragile. A knock at the door interrupted them. Matthias entered with a tray loaded with food, bread still warm from the oven, cheese and fruit, roasted chicken that smelled like heaven, a pot of tea. He set it on the low table between them, bowed again to Zephyrion, and left without speaking. Kira stared at the food, like she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," Zephyrion said gently. "All of it, if you like." She did not need to be told twice. She fell on the food with the desperate hunger of someone who had been rationing and skipping meals for too long, trying at first to maintain some semblance of manners and then giving up, just eating. Zephyrion watched her with an expression that was difficult to read, something between sympathy and calculation, as if he was working through a problem in his mind. When she finally slowed down, the edge of her hunger blunted. She looked up and found him watching her. She flushed, embarrassed. "Sorry, that was, not graceful. You were starving. Grace is not required." He leaned forward slightly. "Kira, I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer." "An offer?" Suspicion crept into her voice. "What kind of offer?" "The kind where you stay here in these rooms for as long as you need. You'll have food, shelter, safety. In exchange, I ask only that you be patient with my people, who are going to react strangely to your presence, and that you trust me to handle the politics that will inevitably arise from this situation." "Politics?" She set down the piece of bread she had been holding. "What politics? I'm just a homeless woman you found in a cemetery." "You were sleeping on my grave," Zephyrion said again, and this time his tone was more serious. "In vampire culture, that's an omen. Some will say it's good, some bad, but all will agree it means something. My court is going to have opinions about you, Kira Kensington, and I need to know that you'll let me manage those opinions in my own way." "And how are you going to do that?" "By keeping you close, by making it clear that you're under my protection, by being very, very careful about how I frame this to the council." She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small in the large chair. "Why would you do all that for a stranger?" It was a good question, and Zephyrion did not have a complete answer, not yet. He could say it was curiosity or whim or a king's prerogative to make strange decisions. He could say that he found her interesting, that her situation touched something in him that he thought he had lost centuries ago. But the truth was that he did not entirely know himself, and that uncertainty was almost as interesting as she was. "Because I can," he said finally. "Because you need help, and I have the resources to provide it, and because I think you sleeping on my grave might be the most interesting thing that's happened to me in a decade." "That's a terrible reason." "Perhaps, but it's honest." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "The offer stands. Stay, rest, let me help you get back on your feet. If at any point you want to leave, you're free to do so. I'm not holding you prisoner, Kira. I'm offering you a choice that you didn't have before." She looked around the room, at the comfortable bed and the warm lights and the remains of the best meal she had eaten in months. She looked at Zephyrion, this vampire king who had found her sleeping on his grave and, instead of being angry, had brought her to his home and fed her. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this, for kindness from impossible sources, for offers that seemed too good to be true. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll stay. For now." "Good." Zephyrion moved toward the door, then paused. "Sleep as long as you like. No one will disturb you. When you wake, there will be clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you, and Matthias will come to check on you. If you need anything, anything at all, just ask." "Zephyrion?" He turned back and she offered him a small tentative smile. "Thank you, really." He returned the smile, and for a moment she saw past the ancient vampire, past the king, to the person underneath. "Sleep well, Kira." After he left, she sat in the chair for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. She had gone to sleep on a grave expecting nothing, maybe even hoping in some dark corner of her mind that she simply would not wake up, that the cold would take her and it would be over. Instead, She had woken to a vampire king who looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving, and now she was in a palace underground, full and warm and safer than she had been in months. Eventually, exhaustion won over confusion. She took a long, hot shower in the marble bathroom, washing away layers of grime and weariness, and found soft pajamas in the wardrobe, just as Zephyrion had promised. The bed was as comfortable as it looked, and she sank into it with a sigh that came from the very depths of her soul. She fell asleep almost instantly, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not dream of falling. Zephyrion did not sleep. He rarely did anymore, needing only a few hours every several days to maintain his strength. Instead, he went to his study, a room lined with books and artifacts from the centuries he had lived, and poured himself a glass of blood from the stores his people maintained. They had ethical sources now, blood banks and willing donors, a far cry from the hunting of his youth. Matthias appeared in the doorway, knocking softly even though the door was open. "Come in," Zephyrion said, not looking up from the book he had been paging through without really reading. Matthias entered, closing the door behind him. He was one of Zephyrion's oldest friends, turned in the same century, one of the few vampires Zephyrion trusted absolutely. "The girl," Matthias began without preamble. "Do you understand what you've done? I've given shelter to someone who needed it." "You've brought the grave sleeper into your own home," Matthias corrected. "The court is going to lose their minds when they hear about this. You know the prophecy." "I know the superstition," Zephyrion said, finally looking up. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "When a human sleeps on a vampire's grave, it means one of two things. Either they will bring about the vampire's destruction, or they will become the most important person in the vampire's life. Those aren't my words, Zephyrion. That's 3,000 years of vampire lore. And you think I should have left her there? Let her freeze? I think you should have given her money for a hotel and sent her on her way." Matthias ran a hand through his dark hair, agitated. "I think you should have done anything except bring her here, where the whole court will see her, where Lyria and her faction will use her as ammunition against you." Lyria. Zephyrion felt a familiar annoyance at the name. Lyria Castellane was beautiful, ancient, ambitious, and convinced that she should be queen. She had been maneuvering for decades to position herself as Zephyrion's mate, and he had been politely declining for just as long. She had a following among the court. Vampires who thought Zephyrion was too soft, too modern, too willing to adapt to the changing world above. "Lyria is always looking for ammunition," Zephyrion said. "If it's not this, it'll be something else. This is different. This gives her a narrative. The king is so reckless, so foolish, that he brings an omen into his own court without knowing whether it's a curse or a blessing. She'll say you're putting all of us at risk. She'll call for a challenge. Then let her challenge me." Zephyrion's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "I've been king for 150 years, Matthias. I didn't get here by being weak, and I didn't stay here by being cautious. If Lyria wants my throne, she's welcome to try to take it." Matthias shook his head, but he was smiling slightly. "You really are going to keep the girl, aren't you?" "Her name is Kira," Zephyrion said. "And yes, I am, at least until she's back on her feet. After that, we'll see." "We'll see," Matthias repeated, his tone making it clear what he thought of that plan. "For what it's worth, I think you're either a genius or an idiot, and I haven't figured out which yet." "Neither have I," Zephyrion admitted, "but I suppose we'll find out together." Matthias left, and Zephyrion returned to his book, but his mind kept wandering to the woman sleeping in his guest quarters. Kira Kensington, who had looked at him without flinching, who had laughed in the face of absurdity, who had accepted his help with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. He had told her the truth when he said she was the most interesting thing to happen to him in years, but there was more to it than that. There was something about her that called to him, something beyond the novelty of the situation. He told himself it was just curiosity. He told himself it would pass. He was not sure he believed it. Kira woke to sunlight streaming through a gap in the heavy curtains and spent several seconds in pure confusion before she remembered where she was, underground, in a vampire's palace. Vampires, because she had slept on his grave. She sat up slowly, taking in the room in daylight, or at least artificial light designed to mimic daylight. Everything looked even more surreal now that she was rested. The furnishings too fine, the space too large, the whole situation too bizarre to quite accept. There was a soft knock at the door, and Matthias entered with a tray. "Good morning," he said, setting it on the table. "I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you." Kira climbed out of bed, suddenly aware that she was wearing pajamas that were not hers in a place she did not belong. "Is Zephyrion awake?" "The king is in his study. He asked me to tell you that you're welcome to join him when you're ready, or to spend the day however you'd like." Matthias's tone was polite, formal, but his eyes kept drifting to her with that same odd look from the night before, as if she was a riddle he could not solve. "Can I ask you something?" Kira said. "Why does everyone keep looking at me like that?" Matthias hesitated, clearly weighing how much to tell her. "Because of where the king found you. Sleeping on his grave is significant in our culture." Zephyrion mentioned that. Something about omens? "More than just omens. There's an old belief that if a human sleeps on a vampire's grave, it means their fates are intertwined, either for creation or destruction." "That's ridiculous," Kira said. "I just needed somewhere to sleep. It doesn't mean anything." "Perhaps not to you," Matthias said carefully. "But to us, symbols matter, stories matter, and this is a very old story." Kira absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. "So everyone thinks I'm either going to destroy Zephyrion or... what? Become his queen?" "Something like that." "Great. No pressure." Matthias's lips twitched, almost a smile. "The king will explain it better than I can. Eat, and I'll take you to him." The food was simple but good. Fresh fruit pastries, coffee that smelled like heaven. Kira ate quickly, then dressed in the clothes from the wardrobe, jeans and a soft sweater that fit her better than anything she had owned in years. She braided her hair to keep it out of her face and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. Matthias led her through the passages, and Kira paid more attention this time, trying to map the layout in her mind. They passed other vampires, all pale-skinned and graceful, all of whom stopped to stare at her with varying expressions of shock, curiosity, or hostility. She kept her chin up and her expression neutral, refusing to be cowed. Zephyrion's study was a beautiful room, full of books and light and comfortable furniture that invited lingering. He was sitting at a large desk near the window, which showed not the outside world, but a painted landscape from another century. He looked up when they entered and smiled, the expression transforming his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "Kira, you look rested." "I am. Thank you for, all of this." She gestured vaguely at the room, at herself, at everything. "Matthias, would you give us a moment?" Zephyrion said, and Matthias bowed and left, closing the door behind him. Zephyrion stood, moving around the desk to lean against it, his posture casual despite the formality of the setting. "I imagine you have questions. So many questions. Then ask. I'll answer what I can." Kira took a breath. "Matthias told me about the grave thing, the omens and fate and all that. Is that real? I mean, do you believe it?" "I believe that symbols have power when enough people invest them with meaning," Zephyrion said carefully. "Do I think you sleeping on my grave means we're destined for some grand fate? Not necessarily. But do I think my court will interpret it that way and act accordingly? Yes. What does that mean for me? It means some will see you as a threat and some as an opportunity. There's a faction in my court that would love to use you as evidence of my poor judgment. They'll argue that I'm being reckless, that I should have turned you away, that I'm putting everyone at risk by bringing you here." "Then why did you bring me here?" Kira asked, frustrated. "Why not just give me money for a hotel like Matthias suggested?" "Because I didn't want to." Zephyrion's eyes met hers, dark and intent. "Because I thought you deserved better than a night in a hotel and then back out on the streets, because I'm the king and I don't make decisions based on what my court will think." "That sounds like a good way to lose your throne." "Perhaps, but I didn't become king by playing it safe." He tilted his head, studying her. "You're not what I expected, Kira Kensington." "What did you expect?" "Someone more intimidated, more overwhelmed. Instead, you're asking me logical questions and pointing out the flaws in my strategy. It's refreshing." I've been scared for months, Kira said quietly. I've been overwhelmed every day since I lost my job. Finding out vampires are real and that I accidentally fulfilled some ancient prophecy is just one more absurd thing in a long line of absurd things. At some point, you run out of capacity for shock. Zephyrion's expression softened. Fair enough. What else do you want to know? What happens now? I mean, assuming I stay for a while. What do I do? Just sit in those rooms all day? You can do whatever you like. Read in the library, explore the passages, ask Matthias to show you the grounds. This isn't a prison, Kira. You're a guest. A guest everyone thinks is either going to kill you or marry you. Well, yes, Zephyrion admitted, a slight smile playing at his lips. But try not to let that pressure you. Despite everything, Kira laughed. It bubbled up from somewhere deep, startled out of her by the sheer ridiculousness of the situation, and once she started, she could not quite stop. Zephyrion watched her with an expression of pleased surprise, as if he had not expected to make her laugh and was delighted that he had. Okay, Kira said when she finally caught her breath. Okay, I'll stay, and I'll try not to accidentally destroy you or your kingdom. But I want to help somehow. I can't just be a freeloader. You're not... I need to help, Kira interrupted firmly. I've been helpless for too long. If I'm going to be here, I need to do something useful. So give me a job. Anything. I'll organize your library. I'll answer correspondence. I'll teach the vampire children to read if you have any. Just let me contribute. Zephyrion considered this, his head tilted. The library could use organizing, he said slowly. My last librarian retired about 30 years ago, and it's been somewhat neglected since then. Would that interest you? Are you seriously offering me a job as a Vampire King's librarian? It seems appropriate, given your previous profession. Kira felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been wound tight with desperation and fear for months. A job, purpose, something to do that was not just survival. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll do it. Then it's settled. Matthias will show you the library this afternoon, and you can start whenever you're ready. Zephyrion straightened from the desk. In the meantime, there's someone I need you to meet. Who? The rest of the court. There's a gathering tonight, and I think it's better to introduce you to everyone at once rather than let rumors build. Are you comfortable with that? Kira's stomach clenched with nervousness, but she nodded. If you think it's necessary. I do. And Kira? He caught her gaze, held it. Stay close to me tonight. Some of my people are going to test you. Try to provoke a reaction. Don't give them one. Just be yourself. And if myself isn't impressive enough for a vampire court, then they'll learn to be disappointed, Zephyrion said simply. I rather think you're impressive exactly as you are. The warmth in his voice caught her off guard, made something flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was just gratitude, nothing more. She had known him for less than a day. This was just relief at being safe, at being fed and sheltered and given a chance. It was not attraction, could not be attraction, because that would be absurd. She told herself that very firmly and tried to ignore the way her heart had sped up when he smiled at her. The library turned out to be Kira's favorite place in the entire underground palace. It was vast, 3 stories tall with a spiral staircase connecting the levels, every wall lined with books that ranged from modern bestsellers to ancient manuscripts kept in climate-controlled cases. There were reading nooks with comfortable chairs, tables for research, and windows that showed false views of forests and mountains, places Zephyrion had apparently loved in his mortal life. Matthias left her there after giving her a brief tour, and Kira wandered through the stacks, trailing her fingers over the spines, breathing in the smell of paper and leather and dust. She could organize this. She could make this space sing. It would take weeks, maybe months, but she could do it, and the prospect filled her with more excitement than she had felt in a long time. She was making notes on a pad of paper she had found when Zephyrion appeared in the doorway, moving so silently she did not notice him until he spoke. Finding everything you need? Kira jumped, pressing a hand to her chest. You have to stop doing that. Doing what? Appearing silently like some kind of ghost? Vampire? He was grinning now, clearly amused by her startlement. Exactly. She held up the notepad. I've already found about 6 different organizational systems that someone started and then abandoned. It's going to take me forever to sort this out. Good thing we have time then. Zephyrion moved into the library, picking up a book from one of the tables and examining it with the casual affection of someone who had owned it for a very long time. I'm glad you like it here. Like it? This is amazing. How many books do you have? I stopped counting around 50,000. That was about 50 years ago. 50,000, Kira breathed, looking around with new appreciation. I could spend a lifetime here. You're welcome to spend as much time as you like. He set the book down carefully. The gathering is in a few hours. Matthias left clothes for you in your room, something appropriate for court. Court, Kira repeated, nervousness returning in a rush. Right. Meeting all the vampires who think I'm either a curse or a blessing. No big deal. You'll be fine, Zephyrion assured her. Just remember what I said. Stay close, be yourself, and don't let them bait you into reacting. What if I mess up? What if I say something wrong and make everything worse for you? He crossed the space between them, reaching out to tilt her chin up with one finger so she had to meet his eyes. Kira, listen to me. You cannot mess this up. Whatever they think of you is not your responsibility. It's mine. I brought you here, I made the decision to keep you, and I will deal with the consequences. All I need from you is to be present. Can you do that? His touch was cool but not unpleasant, and Kira found herself very aware of how close he was standing, how his dark eyes seemed to see right through her defenses. Yes, she said, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. I can do that. Good. He let his hand drop but did not step back immediately. I should tell you, there's likely to be a vampire named Lyria who will be particularly hostile. She has aspirations to be queen and sees you as an obstacle. Why would I be an obstacle? I'm not trying to be anyone's queen. Because the omen says you might be, Zephyrion said, and because she's perceptive enough to see that I find you interesting, which is more than she's managed to achieve in a century of trying. You find me interesting, Kira repeated, focusing on that detail because it seemed safer than thinking about the rest. Very much so. His tone was light, but there was something underneath it, something that made her pulse quicken. Now go get ready. I'll collect you in 2 hours. He left before she could formulate a response, which was probably good, because she had no idea what to say to that. He found her interesting. He had stood up to his entire court for her. He looked at her like she was a mystery he wanted to solve, not a problem he needed to fix. Kira pressed her hands to her face, trying to calm the sudden rush of emotions. She could not afford to develop feelings for a vampire king, no matter how kind he was being. This was temporary. She would get back on her feet, find a new job in the world above, and leave this strange underground palace behind. Anything else was fantasy. She returned to her rooms and found the outfit Matthias had left, a dress in deep blue that was somehow both modest and elegant, with long sleeves and a neckline that did not plunge but still managed to be flattering. There were shoes, too, simple heels that fit perfectly, and jewelry in a small box, silver pieces that caught the light. Kira dressed carefully, trying not to think about how much all of this must cost, how far outside her world she had wandered. She left her hair down, brushed until it shone, and put on just enough makeup to make herself feel presentable. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked elegant, composed, like someone who belonged in a palace. She looked like someone who could stand next to a king. Zephyrion arrived exactly 2 hours later, knocking before entering. He had changed as well, now wearing formal attire that would have looked at home in a period drama, all black and silver with a high collar and intricate embroidery. He looked every inch the vampire king, powerful and ancient and impossibly beautiful. You look lovely, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. Thank you. You look, very kingly. He laughed, offering her his arm. Shall we? Kira took his arm, letting him lead her out of the room and through the passages. The further they walked, the more nervous she became, until her hand was trembling slightly where it rested on his sleeve. Zephyrion covered it with his own hand, the touch reassuring. Breathe, he murmured. You're going to be fine. How can you be so sure? Because I've been doing this for a very long time, and I know my people. They're going to posture and test and judge, but in the end, they'll follow my lead. They always do. The gathering was held in a great hall that looked like something out of a Gothic fantasy, all vaulted ceilings and stone pillars, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Vampires filled the space, perhaps 100 of them, all dressed in finery, all turning to stare as Zephyrion entered with Kira on his arm. The silence was absolute, thick with speculation and barely concealed shock. Kira felt her throat go dry, but she kept her chin up, kept her expression calm, channeling every ounce of strength she had left. Zephyrion led her to the center of the room, where a dais held 2 chairs that looked uncomfortably like thrones. He sat in one and gestured for her to take the other, and she did, feeling the weight of every single gaze in the room. "My court," Zephyrion said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "I want to introduce you to Kira Kensington, who will be residing with us for the foreseeable future. She has taken on the position of court librarian, and I expect her to be treated with the courtesy and respect that position deserves." A murmur ran through the crowd, whispers and speculation. Then a woman stepped forward, and Kira knew without being told that this was Lyria. She was stunning, with the same white hair and pale skin as Zephyrion, but her features were sharp, predatory. She wore red, a gown that was all drama and seduction, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. "My king," Lyria said, her voice silk over steel. "Forgive me, but I must speak what many of us are thinking. This human, this librarian, was found sleeping on your grave. Surely you understand what that means." "I understand perfectly," Zephyrion said, his tone mild. "Which is why I've brought her here, where I can ensure that whatever the omen portends, it unfolds under my watch and by my choice." "But is that wise?" Another vampire spoke up, this one male with dark hair and a thin face. "To bring a potential threat into our very heart?" "If she is a threat, where better to neutralize her?" Zephyrion countered. "And if she is a blessing, where better to receive her? Either way, she stays." Lyria's eyes narrowed. "You cannot simply declare omens do not apply to you, even as king. I'm not declaring anything of the sort. I'm declaring that I will handle this situation as I see fit, and that my decision is final. Unless, Lyria, you wish to challenge me for the right to make different choices?" The room went still. Everyone understood what he was offering, a formal challenge, a fight for the throne. Lyria's face went through several expressions in quick succession, before settling on something like forced calm. "Of course not, my king," she said, but her tone suggested the conversation was far from over. "I merely worry for your safety, as any loyal subject would." "Your concern is noted," Zephyrion said dismissively. He turned to the rest of the court. "Kira is under my personal protection. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or makes her feel unwelcome will answer to me directly. Am I understood?" A chorus of agreement rippled through the hall, some sincere, some clearly reluctant. Zephyrion seemed satisfied. He stood, offering Kira his hand, and led her off the dais and into the crowd. The next hour was a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Vampires approached to meet her, some curious, some openly skeptical. Kira did her best to be polite, to answer questions without giving away how nervous she was, to project confidence she did not feel. Through it all, Zephyrion stayed at her side, a constant presence that was somehow both reassuring and unsettling. He touched her often, small gestures that seemed designed to make a point, his hand on her back, his fingers brushing her arm, his body angled toward hers in a way that suggested possession, protection, both. Kira was not sure what game he was playing, but she understood instinctively that she was part of it, that every gesture was deliberate, calculated to send a message to his court. She was his. He had claimed her, in whatever way vampires claimed things, and anyone who wanted to challenge that would have to go through him first. It should have bothered her, this sense of being used as a political pawn. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. For the first time in months, someone was fighting for her, standing between her and danger, making it clear that she mattered. It was more than she had dared to hope for. Eventually, Zephyrion led her to a quieter corner of the hall, where they could observe the crowd without being immediately surrounded. "You're doing beautifully," he said quietly. "I know this is overwhelming." "It's a lot," Kira admitted. "Everyone's staring at me like I'm either about to sprout fangs or drop dead." "Give them time. Once they realize you're not going anywhere, they'll adjust." Are you sure about that? Lyria looked like she wanted to kill me. Lyria always looks like that, Zephyrion said with a slight smile. She'll settle down once she accepts that her path to the throne doesn't run through marriage to me. Why haven't you married her? Kira asked, surprising herself with the question. I mean, she's beautiful and clearly powerful. Wouldn't it make sense politically? Because I don't love her, and I have no interest in binding myself to someone for eternity based on political convenience. His gaze found hers, held it. I've been alive for 300 years, Kira. I can afford to wait for something real. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. She looked away, focusing on the crowd, trying to get her racing heart under control. This was dangerous territory, this feeling building between them, this sense of connection that should not exist between a homeless human and a vampire king. I should probably get some rest, she said abruptly. It's been a very long day. Of course. If Zephyrion was disappointed, he hid it well. I'll have Matthias escort you back to your rooms. Thank you. And Zephyrion? She turned back to face him. Thank you for tonight, for standing up for me. I know it probably made things complicated. You're worth the complication, he said simply, and then Matthias was there, offering to show her back to her quarters. Kira followed Matthias through the passages, her mind spinning. Back in her rooms, she changed out of the beautiful dress and into the comfortable pajamas, washed her face, and climbed into bed. But sleep did not come easily. She kept replaying the evening in her mind, kept remembering the way Zephyrion had looked at her, the things he had said, the warmth in his voice when he called her interesting. She had been alone for so long, fighting for survival for so long, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care. And now, here was this vampire king, this impossible person who seemed determined to care about her despite every logical reason not to. Kira pressed her face into the pillow and tried not to think about what would happen when she inevitably fell for him completely. The days that followed settled into a routine that felt almost surreal in its normalcy. Kira spent her mornings in the library sorting through decades of accumulated books, creating a proper cataloging system, making notes on volumes that needed repair or preservation. She lost herself in the work, in the soothing rhythm of organizing and categorizing, in the smell of old paper and leather. Zephyrion visited often, sometimes to ask about a specific book, sometimes just to sit and work on his own correspondence while she shelved volumes or repaired bindings. They fell into an easy companionship, comfortable with silence, but just as happy to talk about books, about history, about the strange differences between the world above and the vampire court below. He told her stories about his mortal life, about growing up in Eastern Europe when the continent was carved into different kingdoms, about the night he was turned and the vampire who made him. She told him about her childhood, about her parents and the library where she fell in love with books, about her years struggling to make ends meet after their death. They were learning each other, piece by piece, and Kira found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. The court remained wary of her, but the open hostility faded as the days passed without incident. Some vampires even grew friendly, or at least curious, stopping by the library to ask questions or simply to observe her working. She learned their names, their roles, the complex web of relationships and alliances that made up Zephyrion's court. Only Lyria remained actively antagonistic, though she was clever enough to keep her hostility subtle, manifesting in cutting remarks and social exclusion rather than direct threats. Kira did her best to ignore her, focusing instead on her work and on the small circle of friends she was beginning to build. 3 weeks after Kira arrived, she was deep in the library stacks, balanced on a ladder to reach a high shelf, when she heard voices in the main room below. She froze, recognizing Lyria's tone immediately. It's been weeks, Matthias, and she's still here. When is he going to realize this is absurd? The king's decisions are his own, Matthias replied, his voice carefully neutral. She's a human, a homeless human who had nowhere else to go. She's not special, she's not powerful, she's just desperate, and he's confusing pity for something more meaningful. Have you considered that perhaps the king sees something in her that you don't? What could he possibly see? Lyria's frustration was palpable. She's ordinary, mortal, weak. In 50 years she'll be dead of old age, and what will he have then? Regret and a lonely throne. Unless he turns her. He won't. He's too noble for that, too concerned with choice and consent. He'll let her stay human, and then he'll watch her wither and die, and it will break something in him. I'm trying to spare him that pain. By driving her away? By making him see reason before it's too late. Kira's hands were shaking on the ladder. She should climb down, make her presence known, but she was frozen, caught between the urge to run and the need to hear more. Lyria, Matthias said, and his tone was gentler now. I understand that you care for the king, but this is not the way. If you truly want what's best for him, you'll accept his choice and support him rather than undermining it. I can't watch him make this mistake. Then perhaps you should look away, Matthias said, because he's not going to change his mind. I've known Zephyrion for 200 years, and I've never seen him like this. Whatever this is between them, it's real. Fighting it will only hurt all of you. She's going to destroy him, Lyria said quietly. One way or another, that girl's going to destroy him, and we'll all pay the price. There was the sound of footsteps, and then silence. Kira waited for several long minutes before climbing down from the ladder, her legs unsteady beneath her. She sank into one of the reading chairs, pressing her hands to her face. Lyria was right about one thing. Kira was mortal, temporary, a blip in the life of someone who would live forever. Whatever was growing between her and Zephyrion, it had no future. She would age, and he would not. She would die, and he would continue. And what was the point of starting something that was doomed from the beginning? She should leave. She had some money now from the small salary Zephyrion insisted on paying her for the library work. She could rent a room somewhere, find a job in the world above, rebuild her life properly. Staying here was just delaying the inevitable, making it harder when she eventually had to go. But even as she thought it, she knew she was not going to leave. Not yet. Not while Zephyrion looked at her like she was precious, not while she had a job she loved and a home that felt safer than anywhere she had ever been. She would stay, and she would take whatever time she could have, and when it ended, she would deal with the heartbreak then. She was still sitting there when Zephyrion found her an hour later. He took one look at her face and crossed the room immediately, kneeling beside her chair. "What happened?" he asked, his voice urgent. "Are you hurt?" "No," Kira said. "No, I'm fine. I overheard something, and it made me think." "Overheard what?" She told him about Lyria's conversation with Matthias, watching his expression darken as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, clearly working through what she had said. "Lyria is wrong," he said finally. "About many things, but especially about you being ordinary. You're not ordinary, Kira. You're remarkable." "I'm human," she said. "Mortal. In 50 years, I'll be dead, and you'll still be here, looking exactly like you do now. How is that not a problem?" "It's a problem we have time to solve," Zephyrion said, "if we choose to." "What does that mean?" He stood, pulling another chair close and sitting so they were at eye level. "It means that turning is always an option, if you wanted it. But it's not something to be decided now, not when you've been here less than a month. It's something to think about, to consider carefully, if and when we both decide this is more than temporary." "And what is this?" Kira asked, her heart pounding. "What are we doing here, Zephyrion?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't plan this, I didn't plan you, but I can't seem to stay away, and I don't want to, and I hope, that you feel something similar." "I do," Kira whispered. "That's the problem. I do, and it terrifies me, because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to care about someone who's going to outlive me by centuries." "Then we take it one day at a time," Zephyrion said. "We figure it out as we go. There's no rule that says we have to have everything decided now. We can just exist together and see where it goes." "Is that really enough for you? After 300 years, you're willing to just see where things go?" He reached out, cupping her face with one cool hand. "Kira, I've had 300 years to be certain. I've had 300 years of plans and strategies and careful decisions. For once, I'd like to just feel something without overthinking it. Can we do that? Can we just be, without worrying about the ending?" She wanted to say yes. She wanted to lean into his touch, to stop thinking and just feel. the way he suggested. But fear held her back, the fear of loss that had defined her since her parents died. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of caring about you and then losing you, or losing myself." "I'm scared too," Zephyrion said. "I'm scared of caring about you and then watching you die, of outliving you and spending centuries with the memory. But I think I'm more scared of not taking the chance, of sending you away to stay safe and spending those same centuries wondering what if." "That's terrifying logic." "Isn't it?" He smiled, that warm expression that transformed his face. "But it's all I have. Take a chance with me, Kira. Let's be terrified together." She looked at him, this vampire king who had found her sleeping on his grave, and, instead of turning away, had offered her a home, a job, a place in his impossible world. She thought about the way he looked at her, the way he listened when she talked, the way he made her feel seen and valued and real. She thought about Lyria's words, about destruction and doom and inevitable endings. And then she thought about the library, about the books she loved, about all the stories of people who took chances despite the odds. "Okay," she said. "Okay, let's be terrified together." Zephyrion's smile widened, genuine joy lighting his dark eyes. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question as much as an answer. His lips were cool against hers, but not unpleasantly so, and Kira found herself leaning into the kiss, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. She could not feel a heartbeat there, because his heart did not beat the way hers did, but there was a solidity to him, a realness that grounded her. When they pulled apart, she was breathless, and he was smiling, and the fear was still there, but it was manageable, something she could carry alongside the warmth spreading through her chest. "So," Zephyrion said, "where do we go from here?" "I have no idea," Kira admitted. "I've never dated a vampire king before." "I've never dated a librarian," he countered, "so we're both learning." They sat there in the library talking about nothing important, about everything important, about the impossible situation they had created and what they might do with it. Eventually, Matthias came to fetch Zephyrion for some court matter that could not wait, and Kira returned to her cataloging. But everything felt different now, brighter, more possible. She was falling for a vampire king, and it was terrifying and exhilarating and unlike anything she had ever experienced. She did not know where it would lead, did not know how they would navigate the vast differences between them. But for the first time since her parents died, she was willing to try. The next few weeks were some of the happiest Kira had ever known. She and Zephyrion did not hide their growing relationship, though they kept it relatively private, stealing moments alone in the library or his study, taking walks through the underground passages in the late hours when the court was asleep. He courted her, in his old-fashioned way, bringing her gifts that showed how much attention he paid to her interests. A first edition of her favorite childhood book, a set of tools for book repair, a journal bound in soft leather for her to record her thoughts. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds as thoroughly as they were learning each other's hearts. The court's attitude toward Kira shifted as it became clear that Zephyrion's interest was serious. Vampires who had been distant grew friendlier, seeking her opinion on small matters, including her in conversations. It was still strange, still overwhelming at times, but Kira found herself adapting, finding her place in this underground world. Only Lyria remained hostile, though her antagonism grew more subtle, more dangerous. Kira would catch her watching with cold eyes, would hear whispers that stopped when she entered a room. Zephyrion noticed and warned Lyria off directly more than once, but she was careful never to do anything overt enough to warrant real punishment. 2 months after Kira arrived, the court held a winter festival, a tradition that predated their time in the Americas. The great hall was decorated with evergreen boughs and white lights, creating a space that was both beautiful and slightly surreal. There was music, dancing, blood and wine flowing freely. Zephyrion found Kira early in the evening, looking resplendent in a gown of deep green that Matthias had left in her rooms. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. "I'm not very good," Kira warned, but she took his hand anyway, letting him lead her onto the floor. He was an excellent dancer, unsurprisingly, moving with the grace of centuries of practice. He guided her through the steps, holding her close, and Kira let herself relax into the dance, into his arms, into the moment. "You look happy," he murmured. "I am happy," she said, and realized it was true. Despite everything, despite the strangeness and the danger and the impossible nature of their relationship, she was happy. Is that allowed? More than allowed, encouraged. He spun her gently, pulling her back against his chest. "I want you to be happy, Kira. Always. That's a long time for a vampire. I'm aware." His tone was light, but there was something serious underneath it. "I've been thinking about the future." "Have you?" "About what it would mean if you stayed, not just for weeks or months, but for, well, forever." Kira's breath caught. "Zephyrion, I'm not asking you to decide now," he said quickly. "I just want you to know that I've thought about it, that I want it if you do. Turning you, making you one of us, giving us a chance at forever instead of just a few decades. That's a huge decision. I know, which is why I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just putting it out there. So you can think about it, consider it, without time pressure or urgency." He pulled back slightly so he could see her face. "I love you, Kira Kensington. I didn't plan to, didn't expect to, but I do. And I want whatever future we can build, whether that's 50 years or 5 centuries. Kira's eyes filled with tears. No one had said they loved her since her parents died. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself that she was fine with solitude, that she did not need anyone. And now, here was this man, this vampire, offering her everything. "I love you too," she whispered. "I don't know about forever. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I love you, and I want to try." "Then that's enough," Zephyrion said, and kissed her there in the middle of the dance floor, in front of his entire court. There was a ripple of reaction, whispers and speculation, but Kira did not care. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the love and fear and hope that she had been carrying. When they broke apart, she saw Lyria standing at the edge of the crowd, her expression dark with fury. Kira felt a chill of foreboding, but pushed it aside. This was her moment, her happiness, and she was not going to let Lyria ruin it. Later that night, after the festival had wound down and most of the court had retired, Kira was walking back to her rooms when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Lyria approaching, her beautiful face cold with calculation. "We need to talk," Lyria said. "I don't think we do," Kira replied evenly. "Yes, we do, because you're making a mistake, and you're too blind to see it." "What mistake is that?" "Thinking you can be with him, thinking you belong here." Lyria circled her slowly, like a predator assessing prey. "You're human, Kira. Fragile. Weak. You'll never be strong enough for this world, never be powerful enough to stand beside a king." "Zephyrion doesn't seem to mind." "Zephyrion is blinded by novelty. You're new, different, a distraction from the tedium of immortality. But that will fade, and when it does, he'll realize what everyone else already knows. You're nothing special." The words hit harder than Kira wanted to admit, digging into insecurities she had not entirely overcome. But she kept her expression calm, refusing to give Lyria the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. "If I'm nothing special, then why are you so threatened by me?" Lyria's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not threatened. I'm concerned. For the court, for the kingdom, for Zephyrion himself. He's making poor choices because of you, weakening his position, exposing himself to danger. Eventually, the court will demand he do something about it, and then where will you be?" "That sounds like a threat." "It's a warning. Leave now while you can do so gracefully. Take some money, start fresh in the world above, and let Zephyrion rule without distraction. It's better for everyone." "No," Kira said simply. "No? No, I'm not leaving. Zephyrion wants me here. I want to be here, and what you want doesn't matter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm tired and I'd like to go to bed." She tried to walk past Lyria, but the vampire moved with inhuman speed, blocking her path. "You don't understand what you're refusing." "I understand perfectly. You want me gone so you can have another shot at being queen. But that's not going to happen, Lyria. Zephyrion doesn't love you. He never has, and me leaving won't change that." For a moment, Kira thought Lyria might actually attack her. The vampire's face contorted with rage, her hands clenching into fists. But then Matthias appeared at the end of the corridor, and Lyria forced herself back under control. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I think it is," Kira replied, and walked past her, heart pounding but head held high. Matthias fell into step beside her. I heard raised voices. "Lyria was just sharing her concerns," Kira said. "Nothing I couldn't handle." "She's dangerous when she's cornered," Matthias warned. "Be careful, Kira." "I will. But I'm not going to live in fear of her either." Back in her rooms, Kira locked the door and sat on the bed, letting the adrenaline drain away. Lyria's words kept echoing in her mind, all the ways she was wrong for Zephyrion, all the reasons their relationship could not work. But then she remembered the way Zephyrion had looked at her while they danced, the way he had said he loved her, the way he made her feel like she was exactly where she belonged, and she decided that Lyria was wrong. Not about the challenges, not about the difficulties, but about the fundamental question, whether Kira belonged here with him. She did belong. She had found her place, against all odds, in the most unexpected location, and she was not going to let anyone take that away from her. The next morning, Kira woke to find Zephyrion sitting in one of her chairs, reading a book. She sat up, confused. "How did you get in? I locked the door." "I'm the king," he said mildly. "I have keys to everything. Also, Matthias told me about your encounter with Lyria last night, and I wanted to make sure you were all right." Kira rubbed her eyes, still groggy. "I'm fine. She said some unpleasant things, but nothing I couldn't handle." "She threatened you." "She warned me," Kira corrected. "There's a difference." "Not to me." Zephyrion set the book aside, his expression serious. "Kira, I need you to understand something. If Lyria or anyone else makes you feel unsafe, you tell me immediately. I will not tolerate threats against you, subtle or otherwise. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to, not here. This is supposed to be your home, not a place where you have to constantly watch your back." He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. "I'm going to address this with the court. Make it explicitly clear that you're under my protection and that crossing you is crossing me." "Won't that just make things worse? Make her more desperate?" "Possibly, but it will also make her more careful, which is what matters. Lyria is ambitious, but she's not stupid. She won't risk open defiance." "And if she does?" "Then I'll handle it," Zephyrion said, his voice taking on an edge that reminded Kira he was not just her lover, but a king, someone who had held power for over a century and knew how to wield it. "You don't need to worry about Lyria, Kira. I promise you that." That afternoon, Zephyrion called a court assembly, something formal enough that everyone had to attend. Kira stood beside his throne, feeling the weight of every vampire's gaze as he addressed the assembled court. "There seems to be some confusion," Zephyrion began, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "about Kira's status here. Let me clarify. She is not a guest. She is not a curiosity. She is not a temporary distraction. She is mine, under my personal protection, and anyone who threatens her, harms her, or even makes her uncomfortable will face consequences directly from me. Am I clear?" Silence greeted his words. Lyria stood in the crowd, her face carefully blank, but Kira could see the fury simmering beneath. "Furthermore," Zephyrion continued, "I want to address the omen that brought her here. Some of you see her as a curse, a danger to our kingdom. I see her as a blessing, a gift I did not know I needed. The prophecy says that a human sleeping on a vampire's grave will either bring destruction or become the most important person in that vampire's life. I'm here to tell you, it's the latter. Kira is the most important person in my life, and I will not allow superstition or political maneuvering to change that." He let his words sink in, then added, "If anyone has a problem with this, with her, or with my decisions as king, you are welcome to challenge me. We can settle it in the old way, and whoever survives can rule as they see fit. Otherwise, I expect my decision to be respected and my relationship to be left alone." It was a bold move, putting his throne on the line over a human woman, and the court knew it. There were more murmurs, more speculation, but no one stepped forward to challenge him. Even Lyria, for all her ambition, seemed to recognize that going up against Zephyrion directly would be suicide. "Good," Zephyrion said, satisfaction in his voice. "Then we're all in agreement. This matter is closed." He dismissed the court and led Kira back to his study, where she finally let herself breathe. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Put your throne at risk for me." "Yes, I did," Zephyrion replied. "Because if I can't make the people I love feel safe, then what's the point of being king? Power without purpose is just noise, Kira. You give it purpose." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. He held her close, and they stood like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other's presence. "I've been thinking," Kira said eventually, her voice muffled against his shirt, "about what you said, about forever." Zephyrion's arms tightened around her. And I think I want it. Not right now, I'm not ready yet, but someday. I want to stay with you for as long as we can have. I want forever." He pulled back just enough to see her face, and the joy in his expression was unlike anything she had ever seen. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I'm sure. I love you, Zephyrion, and I don't want to waste the time we have being afraid of the future. So yes, someday when I'm ready, I want you to turn me." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring centuries of loneliness and hope into the connection. When they broke apart, both were breathless, and Kira was smiling despite the tears on her cheeks. "Whenever you're ready," Zephyrion promised. "There's no rush. We'll know when the time is right." The months that followed were peaceful, happy in a way Kira had not known was possible. She continued her work in the library, creating a system that other vampires actually started to use, bringing the collection into the modern era while preserving its historical treasures. She grew close to Matthias and several other members of the court, building friendships that felt real and solid. Her relationship with Zephyrion deepened, moving from infatuation to genuine partnership. They learned each other's rhythms, their moods and needs and fears. He showed her parts of himself he had hidden for centuries, the vulnerabilities beneath the kingship, and she trusted him with her own broken places, the scars left by loss and loneliness. Lyria remained a cold presence at the edge of things, but after Zephyrion's declaration, she kept her distance, her hostility confined to icy looks and subtle snubs that Kira learned to ignore. It was clear the vampire had not given up her ambitions, but she was biding her time, waiting for an opportunity that Kira hoped would never come. 6 months after Kira arrived, she woke one morning with a clarity she had not expected. She found Zephyrion in his study and said, without preamble, "I'm ready." He looked up from the letter he was writing. "Ready for what?" "To be turned." "I'm ready." Zephyrion set down his pen carefully. "Kira, are you sure? There's no rush." "I'm sure. I've thought about it every day for months, and I'm ready. I want this life with you. I want forever." He stood, crossing to her, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. "Then we'll do it. But not here. I want to take you somewhere special, somewhere meaningful." "Where?" "The cemetery. The grave where I found you." "I think it's fitting, don't you? To end your mortal life where we began?" Kira felt a shiver run through her, but it was anticipation, not fear. "Yes, that's perfect." They planned it for the new moon, when the darkness would be absolute. Zephyrion arranged everything, ensuring they would not be disturbed, that the transition would be as smooth as possible. He explained the process in detail, made sure she understood what she was choosing, what it would mean. Kira listened, asked questions, and never wavered in her decision. The night of the new moon, they went to the cemetery together, climbing the hill to the grave where this had all started. The stone looked the same as it had that first night, weathered and ancient, though Kira knew now that the date was fabricated, a fiction to hide the truth of what Zephyrion was. "After tonight," Zephyrion said, standing beside the grave, "we're going to change this. Replace the stone with something new, something that is both our names, a marker not of death, but of beginning." "I love that," Kira said softly. She sat on the grave in the exact spot where she had slept that first night and looked up at him. "I'm ready." Zephyrion knelt beside her, cupping her face with both hands. "I love you, Kira Kensington. In 300 years, I have never loved anyone the way I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, "now and forever." He kissed her, gentle and reverent, and then he moved to her neck, his lips finding the pulse point there. Kira felt the sharp pain of his fangs breaking skin, felt her blood flowing out, and instead of fear, she felt peace. This was right. This was what she wanted. The world began to fade, her heartbeat slowing, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Zephyrion pulled back, biting his own wrist and pressing it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded, and she did, tasting blood for the first time, coppery and strange and somehow perfect. Power flooded through her, chasing back the darkness, remaking her from the inside out, her senses sharpened, sounds and smells becoming overwhelming in their intensity. Her heart stuttered, stopped, and then was still, and yet she did not die. She transformed, became something new, something more. When it was over, when the change had settled into her bones, she opened her eyes and saw the world as a vampire for the first time. Everything was clearer, brighter, more vivid. She could hear Zephyrion's breathing, could smell the earth and stone around them, could feel the night air on her skin with perfect clarity. "How do you feel?" Zephyrion asked, watching her with concern and hope mingled in his expression. Kira stood, testing her new body, marveling at the strength and grace that now came naturally. She looked at her hands, saw the pallor that now matched Zephyrion's, and felt her hair, which had lightened to a silvery white. "I feel," she said slowly, "like I'm finally home." Zephyrion's smile was radiant. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Kira clung to him, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. "Welcome to forever," he murmured against her hair. They stood there on the grave for a long time, two vampires where there had been one and a human, two hearts that no longer beat but still felt everything. When they finally returned to the palace below, the court was waiting, gathered to witness the result of the transformation. Kira walked in on Zephyrion's arm, her head held high, and the court bowed. It was not a gesture of subservience, but of acceptance, recognition that she was now one of them, that she had earned her place not through birth or power, but through choice and love. Lyria was notably absent, and when Kira asked Matthias about it later, he explained that she had left the court entirely, unable to bear watching Zephyrion choose someone else. "Do you think she'll come back?" Kira asked. "Maybe, but not for a long time. And by then, it won't matter. You'll have proven yourself 100 times over, and her grievances will seem petty." Matthias smiled at her. "Welcome to the family, Kira." The weeks after her transformation were challenging as Kira learned to control her new strength, her new senses, the hunger that came with being a vampire. Zephyrion was patient, teaching her everything she needed to know, helping her navigate this new existence. They went back to the cemetery together one afternoon, bringing with them a new grave marker. This one was simple but beautiful, white marble carved with both their names and 2 dates, Zephyrion's false death in 1724 and Kira's transformation date. Below that, a 3rd date was left blank, a promise of a future they would face together. The inscription read simply, "Here begins forever." They installed it themselves, replacing the old stone with the new, marking the place where their story had started. Kira stood back to admire it, feeling a sense of completion she had not known she needed. "What do you think?" Zephyrion asked. "I think it's perfect," Kira said. "A grave that's not really a grave. An ending that's actually a beginning. That's very poetic of you." "I've been spending a lot of time with books," she said lightly. "It's rubbing off." They walked through the cemetery together, hand in hand, talking about their plans for the future. Zephyrion wanted to travel, to show Kira the world now that she had the time to see all of it. Kira wanted to expand the library, perhaps create a program to preserve mortal literature for future generations. They had time for all of it. They had forever. A year after Kira's transformation, the court held a celebration in honor of her first anniversary as a vampire. The Great Hall was decorated even more elaborately than the Winter Festival had been, with flowers and lights and music that spoke of joy rather than mere tradition. Kira wore a gown of silver that matched her hair, and Zephyrion wore his formal attire, and they danced together as they had that first festival, but now as equals, as partners, as two people who had chosen each other against all odds. Matthias gave a toast, speaking of how Kira had not just joined the court but had improved it, bringing new ideas and fresh perspective, reminding them all of what it meant to choose rather than simply exist. Other vampires echoed the sentiment, and Kira felt overwhelmed by the acceptance, by the sense of belonging she had finally found. Late in the evening, Zephyrion took her hand and led her away from the celebration, back to the cemetery, back to their grave. They sat on the new marker together, looking out at the city lights in the distance. "Do you ever regret it?" Zephyrion asked. "Choosing this life?" "Never," Kira said without hesitation. "Do you regret finding me here?" "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "I was existing, Kira, not living. Going through the motions of kingship without any real passion or purpose. You changed that. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond duty." "I was homeless," Kira said softly. "I had nowhere to go, nothing to hope for. I came here expecting nothing and found everything. How could I regret that?" "You found me sleeping on your grave," Zephyrion corrected with a smile, "and decided to give me a chance. Best decision I ever made." They kissed there in the moonlight, two vampires who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something real from it. Around them, the cemetery was quiet, peaceful, and below them, through the entrance hidden in the mausoleum, was a palace full of their people, their friends, their family. "Tell me about forever," Kira said, leaning against Zephyrion's shoulder. "What are we going to do with it?" "Everything," Zephyrion replied. "We're going to do everything. Travel, learn, grow, change. We're going to watch the world transform around us and transform with it. We're going to build a library so extensive that scholars will weep, and we're going to collect stories from every century, every culture, every corner of the world." "That sounds perfect. We're going to have arguments and make up and argue again. We're going to discover new things about each other even after decades. We're going to be surprised and bored and excited and frustrated, because that's what forever means. Not perfection, but continuity. Not unending bliss, but unending opportunity." "When did you become so wise?" Kira teased. "I've had 300 years to think about it," Zephyrion said, "and exactly 1 year of experiencing it with someone I love. The theory was nothing compared to the practice." They sat there talking until dawn approached and they had to retreat underground, but they returned to the grave often after that, making it a tradition. It was their place, the spot where everything had changed, where a desperate woman with nowhere to go had found a vampire king willing to offer her everything. Years passed, then decades. Kira and Zephyrion traveled the world together, saw wonders and collected memories, and always returned to the palace beneath the cemetery, to the court that had become their home. The library grew beyond anything Kira had imagined that first day, becoming famous even among vampires as a repository of knowledge and literature. They faced challenges, of course. There were political struggles within the court, threats from outside factions, the constant evolution of the world above. But they faced them together, two people who had chosen each other and continued choosing each other every single day. One evening, more than 50 years after Kira's transformation, they walked through the cemetery again, approaching their grave. The stone had weathered beautifully, the inscription still clear, the blank date still waiting. "Do you remember what you were thinking that first night?" Zephyrion asked. "When you chose this grave to sleep on?" "I was thinking that I was tired," Kira said honestly, "that I was so tired of fighting and struggling and trying to survive. I think part of me hoped I wouldn't wake up. And now? Now I'm grateful I did. I'm grateful you found me. I'm grateful for every night we've had and every night we'll have." She looked at the grave, at their names carved in marble, at the promise of forever. "This isn't really a grave, is it? It's a monument to second chances." "And new beginnings," Zephyrion added. "We should build something here, on this spot, something living, something that serves a purpose." "Like what?" "A home," he said slowly, the idea forming as he spoke. "We could convert this area, build a residence that incorporates the grave as part of its foundation. A place that's just ours, separate from the court, where we can retreat when we need privacy." "A house built on a grave," Kira said, considering it. "I love it. It's appropriately gothic for a vampire couple." They hired architects, mortal and immortal both, and over the next several years they built their home. It was a beautiful structure, modern but with classical touches, and at its center, visible through a glass floor in the main living area, was the grave marker with their names. The entrance was through the original gravesite, converted into a staircase that descended to the living spaces below. Every time they came home, they walked across that marker, across their names, across the promise of forever. Kira filled the house with books, of course, creating smaller, cozier libraries in multiple rooms. Zephyrion filled it with art and music, with mementos from their travels. Together, they created a space that was uniquely theirs, a home in the truest sense. They hosted friends there, held intimate gatherings, and enjoyed the solitude when they needed it. The court continued at the main palace, and they remained active in its governance, but the grave house became their sanctuary, the place where they were not king and consort, but simply Zephyrion and Kira, two people who loved each other. 80 years after that first night, they stood in their living room looking down at the grave marker through the glass floor, and Kira said, "We should add something to the inscription." "What did you have in mind?" She had nowhere else left to go, and he gave her everywhere. "Something like that. So anyone who finds this, centuries from now, will know the story." "I like that," Zephyrion said, "though I might phrase it differently. She had nowhere to go, he had nowhere to be. Together, they found home." "That's better," Kira admitted. "Let's do it." They had the inscription added, the words carved into the base of the monument, telling their story in brief for any future archaeologist or vampire who might wonder about the strange grave house built over an old cemetery plot. Time continued its march. The world above changed in ways neither of them could have predicted when they met. Technology advanced, societies shifted, and through it all the vampire court adapted, Zephyrion leading them with wisdom earned over centuries, and Kira bringing fresh perspective earned through choice. They watched mortal friends age and pass, a bittersweet reminder of what Kira had given up and gained. They mourned and celebrated and continued, as vampires did, as they would always do. 100 years after Kira's transformation, the court held a centenary celebration in her honor. It was a massive affair, with vampires coming from courts around the world to pay their respects to the woman who had slept on the king's grave and become legend. Matthias gave another speech, this one reflecting on a century of friendship, on how Kira had changed not just Zephyrion, but all of them, reminding them what it meant to choose rather than simply accept fate. Kira stood before the assembled vampires, feeling the weight of 100 years and the lightness of forever stretching ahead, and she said, "Thank you for accepting me, for giving me a chance, for letting me prove that sometimes the omens are right, but in unexpected ways. I did not destroy your king. I fell in love with him, and he with me, and together we've built something worth having. That's the blessing. Not power or prophecy, but connection, love, choice." The court erupted in applause, and Zephyrion pulled her close, kissing her in front of everyone, claiming her as thoroughly as he had that first declaration decades ago. Later, they returned to their grave house, to their sanctuary, and sat together in comfortable silence, looking at the marker that had started it all. "No regrets?" Zephyrion asked, a question that had become ritual over the decades. "Not a single one," Kira replied, as she always did. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner." "We found each other at exactly the right time," Kira said. "I wasn't ready before. I had to lose everything to understand what I needed, what I wanted, and you had to wait 300 years to be ready for me." "Worth every year," Zephyrion said. They stayed there through the night, talking and laughing and planning the next century, the next millennium, all the forevers they had still to explore. The grave beneath them was no longer a symbol of death or ending, but of transformation, of the moment when two lives intersected and changed each other irrevocably. Kira had been homeless, desperate, with nowhere left to go. She had chosen a vampire's grave as her resting place, hoping for nothing more than a single night of peace. She had found a king, a love, a forever she never could have imagined. And the vampire king, ancient and powerful and lonely, had found the one thing he had been missing for 3 centuries, someone to share his immortality with, someone who chose him not for his power or position, but for himself. Together, they had built a life from impossible circumstances, proving that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. The grave marker would remain, centuries into the future, long after the cemetery around it crumbled, and the city above transformed beyond recognition. It would stand as a testament to the night a desperate woman found unexpected shelter, and a king found unexpected love, and two fates intertwined in the darkness. The epitaph told their story in brief, but the truth lived in every moment they shared, every century they built together, every choice they made to continue choosing each other. She had nowhere else left to go. He gave her everywhere, and they lived, truly lived, forever after.